Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial. This will be tutorial number 13, and today we're going to be making the stone wall. First of all, I know it's been a while since my last tutorial. Been a little busy. Like I said, I went to do some tutorials on Substance Designer, get a little bit better so I can bring you guys more advanced techniques and materials just overall. Also, we are now recording in a higher video quality, as well as I got a new mic, so hopefully you guys can understand me better. And since obviously the work that we do here with Substance Designer, it's all about details, so figured increasing the video quality was probably needed by now. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think about the new microphone and recording in a higher quality. So let's get right into it. So this is going to be the stone wall that we're making. We're going to have, as usual, several variations. We have this snow one as well, just because it was really easy to add at the very end. Obviously, this is also going to work with different patterns. So, you'll be able to make different bricks, or if you want squares or stuff like that. We'll be doing that towards the end. And then the other variant that we'll have is wet. So you can see here, these are obviously more wet than the previous ones, but these ones are not just like overall wet because this is a stone wall. Actually, the wetness is dripping from the top of the brick and from under the brick above, and it's kind of like falling over it. That's why you can see here that it's not like just wet across everywhere. It's got some spots that are dry, and then like the wetness is kind of coming from the top and dripping over. And you can also tell that the dripping is also like darkening the stone. So we have a lot of stuff to cover, but since this is episode 1, and that's typically height, we're going to be focused on height information. So all of these details, we have, stone shapes, we have like cuts. You can see it right here. We have pores, we have damage, edge wear, scratches. We have all sorts of details. I think this is my most detailed texture to date, so I'm very proud of it, and I wanted to give you guys one last thing before the end of the year. So we're going to end with a good detailed material. Alright, so let's hop right into it. Alright, so here we are in Substance Designer, and just before we get started, I do want to give you guys a disclaimer here. I'm about to show you the entirety of the graph. If you're easily intimidated by large graphs, and it's sorry, something came up. Yeah, so it's a large graph, but if that is discouraging, then I suggest you skip a few seconds. But just to kind of show you before we get started here, I've already disconnected all of the blends, so that's what just the plane. But if you hit F, if you click outside and then hit F, it basically zooms out to your most further nodes, furthest. All right, so yeah, I have a lot of things turned off, so we can just get started. All right, so first things first, we're going to start with this tile random 2. I'm just going to double click that. X and Y 10 by 10. We've lowered the interstice thickness to 0.1. I'm not sure which ones of these are changed and which ones of these are default. Obviously, I think this rotation one here is not default. So just take a second and pause. Let's just go down here. We have a little bit of a slant. The reason why I use the tile random 2 is because let me just swap this over here. We can get rid of this guy. It's because obviously it gives you some random tiles. They're not like this other pattern here. This also tile random grayscale, which is like the first one, and then this is the second one. But yeah, just I don't think it's random seed 0. I don't think there's anything special, just You know, if you're following along, just match the settings here. Just right off the bat, we put that through a flood fill. And then into a flood fill to random grayscale. And the reason for this is because I want to use the flood fill to identify each of these islands. And it's going to identify the islands based on the spacing. If you have like at least one black pixel in between your island, then it's going to detect it. If they're stuck together, then it's going to count it as one island. So because we're using a flood fill, we're able to identify the islands and then use the flood fill to gradient grayscale. Or not gradient, sorry, to random grayscale. It's able to assign them a random grayscale value to each of those islands. And then with that, we're able to use this distance node to push out the pixels from the edge of the island. And since these these islands are all one color, it just pushes out that color in all directions. Now, normally I go all the way with the distance, but this time we're just going up to 3.5. And I'm using the Chebyshev distance mode here. And then I'm using only source. Now, I did push them out, as you can see here. This is before and then this is after. I'm not pushing them all the way. It's okay if some of them touch. And then here, I'm going to use an edge detect. And then we have this blend here. And then we have another edge detect. So the reason why we have two is because I want varying sizes on these bricks. So these ones have an edge width, which is the space between, of 1.25 and a roundness of 0.5 on the corners. And then these ones are 1.375, which is a bigger gap than these. So you can see that these bricks are going to be different or varying sizes. And then I basically copied these two, but the special thing here is the opacity that we have input here. So I used the histogram select from this distance to basically isolate or remove some of the bricks randomly. And then when I feed that into the opacity, it's using this mask for these guys. So if we weren't using this right here, like these three nodes, all my bricks will look like this, but because we're using this mask and then using a smaller, or I guess a larger spacing, which equals smaller bricks, we're able to get varying sizes. And then we basically do that again here one more time. And then these ones, you can tell it's just making smaller sized bricks, and that's because we're doing the same process we just did here. But this time, this edge detect is set to a bigger gap, which means smaller bricks. And then again, I'm taking a histogram select with different settings from the same distance. You could use a scan, but the scan will give you basically the same results every time because it's based off of this. But with a histogram select, you're able to, let me just show you. So it's the same amount basically. So the range is the same, but you can change the position. And then you can also increase the range and then change the position. And you can see that they're all like kind of changing, which will give you more diversity than the contrast. So this is just kind of like an improved histogram contrast. And you can also do the same thing as a scan. You just turn the contrast up, which is what we did here. So we do that again for these two. And then same thing, copy, the select goes into the opacity and the edge detect goes on the foreground. And then we have three varying sizes. So if we go through here, so this is one size, two, and then three. Now, this would probably look more noticeable if you were using like this guy here, because then they would all be, let's try it. So then you go from here to this one to this one. So you can see that they're changing. But here, they're all very varying sizes because of the tile random anyways. So it's a little hard to notice. But just to have more variety on our bricks. All right. So now from this guy, we do another flood fill. And now what I'm trying to do here, let me just turn this guy on. So this is my weird brick remover. So because of the method that we used, sometimes we'll get like these weird bricks based on the edge detect. Because if we go back over here, this black space in between here is large enough that the edge detect is going to detect as an individual shape, right? So this is a weird looking brick. I don't want it. And I also want some gaps in between my bricks. So this method here allows us to pinpoint and select the small bricks, the smallest bricks or the largest bricks. And by being able to isolate them, we can remove them. So the way that works is, I think we've used this node before, but after the flood fill, we'll need a flood fill to B-box size. B-box stands for bounding box size. So every island here has a bound, right? So like ignore the rounded corners and they would go all the way up to there. So that's like its bounding box, right? So for this guy here, its bounding box would look like this because it takes like the most outer parts of that island. So by default, it's pretty dark. So we'll use an auto levels here to get the full range. So flood fill into a B-box size, into an auto levels, into a histogram scan for this first row here. And then that will go into your background. And it's set to multiply. Now, because the B-box sizes after the auto level have like a better gradient of, so the dark ones are the small ones. So like these are really tiny. And then the bigger ones are white. If we were to invert this auto levels, then it would be the opposite. The bright ones would be the small ones, and the dark ones will be the big ones. So now, because they're basically gradients based on size, then we can use the scan to just follow along through this part. If we turn the contrast up. So now the last ones to pop in are going to be the small ones. So if we just leave it up here, all the small ones are gone. Now another setting of this B-box size thing is that it's taking the bounds from the X and the Y. So, you know, this way and this way. Now, if you want to pinpoint like really thin guys, which we will be doing, like these guys, this would be based on the Y. If you want to get the smallest Ys, then this would be like probably one of the smallest, or maybe this. Well, this one would be on the, or actually this would be. I don't know how it calculates it, but obviously, you know, this is X and this is Y. So when you do, you know, X is it calculating like, yeah, it's probably calculating this way, and then this is Y. So it's giving you like the tallest, the highest value Y. So maybe this would be white, and then like the other ones would be. But anyways, you get the idea. So here we're just taking out the overall smallest bounding boxes because we're using XY. So then that's going to go in here. So this is the original. So as you can see, it's got this little one, and then this one has those guys removed. So then we do this one more time. But this time we I'm doing Y first. Then I'm doing the same process, auto levels into a histogram. And now we're removing those skinny guys. And then we do this one more time, except this one we're doing X. So you can see these ones are the flat ones, the flat skinny, and then these are the tall skinnies that we're getting rid of. So by multiplying these two masks, then we get one where both of those are gone, the tall skinny and the flat skinnies. And then we multiply that again with this one, which is just removing the overall bounding box small ones together. So now we've removed skinny, skinny tall, skinny flat, and skinny overall. And then here I do a histogram scan because sometimes this will give me a result with like a gradient, which obviously we don't want. We just want a black and white mask. So I just have a scan set to 1, 1. And, you know, if you want to have everything back in, then you can just pull from this guy before the flood fill. Because this flood fill is only working for this. But if you want like the removed ones like I did, gives you more interesting spacing. Alright. So another flood fill after this guy. You can use as many flood fills as you like. I used to think you would really only need one per material, but you know, as you continue, they're kind of expensive, but they're really useful. Okay, so after our histogram scan, we go into a flood fill. Now, I use a lot of portals in here, so if we spawn in a dot node, and then you can change, you know, what this portal. I do have a lot of them, so something I've like really started to use, which makes your graphs just so much neater. So after this flood fill, I connect this into this flood fill to random grayscale, and then in between. So like if you have this, create a dot in the middle. So pretend that this guy right here is this guy. I just make a dot in the middle by holding left alt and clicking. Once you hold left alt, you'll see this node here, like the yellow one. Then you can click and it'll spawn one in there. You can hit backspace to delete them without breaking the connection. And then you select this guy and then just type in like, you know, whatever you want, portal 1, portal 2. So in my case, that's what I did to get this. And then this one I called FF main, which means flood fill. So flood fill main. So this is my main flood fill. And I start with FF because it'll be anything related to this flood fill will start with FF, so that they come up together in my list. So if we go here, do that. Actually, let me just spawn a blank one. Because there's one other thing that is actually really nice, but real quick. So you can see here I have my flood fill main, my random color D. I'll explain what this is in a second. Gradient, grayscale D. But basically, if you try to, okay, so like later on we have a node here called mask brick shape. If I try to use this node back here, it won't let me, well, I can spawn it back here, but I can't use it with anything. What was it called? Mask brick shape. It won't plug. Okay, it will plug, but in some cases it won't. And it's because that portal is dependent on, you know, this stuff. So it's kind of like the time traveling paradox. Like, how can you go back and kill, you know, your evil grandparents, because then you wouldn't exist. So that same thing happens here, where like if this, let's say this portal is a result of something here, then you can't use it to make changes here because it's going to change this. It's like this like looping error. But it's also nice because then it tells you like that this isn't going to work. It's kind of like a safety net. Okay, so enough yapping. Okay, I'm gonna go a little faster. Okay, so after our flood fill main here, you know, we have a random grayscale, and then I do the same thing. I'll pull from it, and then I call this one, you know, flood fill or FF random grayscale, and then that goes into a distance node, and then after that it goes into an auto level just to make sure that I'm getting the full range of that grayscale. And then I do another node, and then this one is called the same thing as this guy, except I have a D, and the D just stands for distance. So I know that this portal is coming from here. So it has like the in-between black, and then the random grayscale D for distance is where the pixels are all pushed out. And sometimes you'll need this, sometimes you'll want this. So that's why I have the two named the same, except I have a D for distance. And whenever you spawn a portal, you can double click, you know, this to show you what the output is. So if you don't have to like fly back to where it came from to see what it is, you can just click that. Okay, so after the histogram scan here, we're also going to pull another connection down here. And that's going to come out here, and that's what's being used into the mask input for this distance. And it's going to be the same one used for this guy. So it's just our initial brick mask is going to be what goes in these two. And then from this FF main, we have this flood filter random color. Same thing over here. We'll just have another portal. And then here we have our distance. Now for these distances, we're using the normal Euclidean distance mode. And again, this is just going to be a new portal for FF random color D, again for distance. And then we have another flood fill here set to gradient. And then I'm using a random seed of 1 for this one. Doesn't really matter. Angle variation of 1. And then again, just to keep these all aligned and neat and clean, I just have them all lined up together. And this one's FF flood fill random gradient. So now we're going to be using these throughout our graph. So now that we have these, so you can see everything that it connects into. Then after we have these set up, I'm going to do a node here. Well, actually, let's hold off on this. Let's go over here. So I'm going to enable this so we can see what it's doing. So you can see here, and then now we're going to create some edge cuts. So we're going to cut the edges of our brick so that they're not so perfect. So this one's set to multiply, and we're taking our FF main, which is this guy, and we're doing another flood fill to gradient, and this one's set to 0. That's why these are different. I guess this one should be 0 and this one should be 1. That way they're kind of in order. But the way I did this, I made this one first, then that one, but it doesn't matter. So this one's set to 0 just so that they're different. Same thing, angle variation all the way up. And then I use the histogram scan to get rid of the gradient and get rid of, see, if this goes all the way up, it just gives me white again. But because I stop it here, and it's stopping it here based on the gradient. So it gives me these cuts, and then I just gotta apply these cuts to the main. So I multiply to get rid of them. So we go from that to that, and then I just repeat that again to get more cuts. I take the flood fill main into another flood fill gradient, and then this one's set to 1, which is different than this guy. Otherwise, they would line up the same. Then same thing, we just scan. This is 0.9. Multiply. Then we do this. Oh no. Here we do something similar to the edge cutting. Same concept, but done in a different way. So we have this blend here set to multiply. So let me show you what it does first. Let me just pick a brick. Now you can see the difference. So what we did here, we start with a Perlin noise set to 8. Now here I set up another portal. And let me just talk to you guys what these numbers and names mean. So obviously we have noise because it's a noise. So anything like clouds, crystals, anything like that would be considered a noise. And also it's in the name. So I call this one noise. That way it keeps all my noises together. And then I have the name afterwards. So this one's a Perlin noise. So then it's noise Perlin. And then I have that times 8, which is just supposed to represent the scale. So this is a scale of 8. So that's times 8. And then 0, 0 is supposed to represent the random seed. So if I have 2 of these that are the same scale, so they both have a scale of 8, but they're different, then this would be the differentiator of the 2. Now, this is probably like super complicated naming conventions. You can call it whatever you'd like. You can just call it noise Perlin if you want. But I just made it easier for myself to be able to have a bunch of them and see which one's which. So, for example, this Gaussian's 32, scale of 32. I have 2 noise Perlin, or 3. I have the 8, the 12, and the 32. And then there's seed numbers, so they're different. So, probably don't need this, but I don't know, something I came up with while doing this material. All right, so then we use a vector warp grayscale, which is obviously to break up our our noise so that it's not, the damage isn't running from one brick to another. And then we use our flood fill random color D. So this is the fully distanced one. And then I always use a value intensity of 10. Technically anything over than 1 is good, but I use 10 just to make sure that it's completely, warped. Then we use a slope blur grayscale, which is using the brick large edge cut 2 for the grayscale. And then we're using this for the slope. Now, you can see what it's doing here. It's warping the slopes. And then we're using this gradient the same way we kind of used it here, where we use that gradient to cut from this corner to that corner, and then we get that cut. We do the same thing here. So we're taking that gradient from all of our bricks, because they all have them, and they're all in random places. And then we're basically scanning to get rid of some of it, and then multiplying. And because we're multiplying, it gets rid of these black lines that come from the distance node. So it just gives us a little bit more, because right now these guys are kind of working on the edges and kind of just cutting on a straight line. So this gives us some cuts that are more, you know, so you can see there's a bit of a curve here that's giving us more natural cuts. And there's tons of ways to do this. It's just the way I decided to use here. Okay, so then after edge variation, this is the last time we are altering the initial islands of our bricks. So I make a portal, and we call this one mask brick shape. And then here under brick slope 01, this is where we start adding our slopes. But I just realized we forgot, or I forgot to talk about our initial settings. So forgive me. Let's go all the way over here. Okay, so what you guys are going to do is forget everything behind this levels. So don't worry about this stuff here. Just spawn in a levels, and then wherever we just left off, plug that into the input. And then from that levels, this level is just a cosmetic. It's just here as a placeholder. So everything here is set to default. Plug that into a new portal and call that portal final height. And then plug that into your height. And then from that final height node, we're going to be using a height to normal world units. Basically, this is to give us more realistic normal, something I learned in a tutorial. So basically, I'm just going to go over this quickly. So basically here, the surface size is telling you, or we're telling Substance Designer that this texture is 200 centimeters or 2 meters by 2 meters. So 2 meters this way and 2 meters this way. So it's, and then the height depth is basically telling us that the distance is 10 centimeters from top to bottom. So if we go back to, let me go back over here. So if we go back over here, basically the lowest point is 0 and the highest point is 10 centimeters. So that calculates, that'll help us calculate our ambient occlusion, because it knows realistically in real, you know, world space units how big these bricks are. So it's 2 meters by 2 meters, and then you know how tall the lowest point and the highest point are. Now also, I'm going to go here into materials, defaults, and edit, and I'm going to turn on our tessellation factor to 8. And then our height scale, we're going to go with, is it 10? No, that's way too much. I think it's 5. I'm going to double check that, but I think it is 5. 1 second. Yes, it is 5. So yeah, so let's go back over to this guy, and our height depth is 10, and like I just said, our tessellation, our height scale is 5. So set that to 5, and it'll look wonky for a bit, but then once we start adding things to it, it'll look different. But yeah, these bricks extrude pretty far out. And then make a portal and call that normal height end. And then for now, just plug this into the normal normalize, because it's something we do a little later. Normal normalize, it just normalizes your normals. I think it brings them into realistic ranges. So sometimes when you spawn in a normal node, typically this is how we used to do our stuff here. Actually, let's just do a noise. I don't know why I'm doing a shape. So if we did a clouds too and we plug that in, our normal here is pretty weak, and then we would adjust it to, you know, match our needs. Sometimes we'd go really high up like this, and it might look okay to us. Whoa. Sorry, getting used to the new setup. I accidentally hit the mic. And this might look good to us, but it might not be accurate. So what a normal normalize does is it basically... Okay, there's no difference, but let's go something ridiculous then. Alright, I did some tests. Forget everything I just said. Keep it anyways, because it looks cool. I think it depends on what you're doing. I don't think that Clouds 2 had enough detail for it to work, but basically in the tutorial that I saw, I could see the difference, but we'll worry about that when we get there. So yeah, just plug in your normal height end portal into your normal normalize, or if you don't want it, don't have it, and just have that go into your normal. And then here we're using RTAO, which is ray tracing ambient occlusion, which is just a more expensive version of the HBAO, which is the something horizon based. There it is. Boom. AO filter. So they're both AO, but one's more expensive than the other because one's ray tracing and the other one's horizon based, whatever that means. So if you don't have a super good computer, use the HBAO, and then these are the settings that I found match what the RTAO does the best. And then for the RTAO, this is what we're doing here. Height scale of 0.05, 128, boom, boom, boom. Plug that into a auto levels and then into a portal called final AO, and then plug that into your ambient occlusion. Should have started with this. Okay, now let's go back. All right, where did we leave off? Right here. Okay. So we just turned this on, which is a min darken, set to 0.85. And then we're basically continuing this path, which you could spawn in a different portal node for all of these to prevent having this, you know, string, but it's alright because it's all continuous, so I don't mind. Now, if these guys were like, one was over here and one was over here, then I probably would care. So just continue from there, and then that goes into this flood filter gradient, and then we change the random seed again to 2. And then it gives us this. So we go from this to that. And then we do this one more time. Same thing, except this one's 0.8. Also min darken. And then we take from the same string into a flood fill gradient, set to 1, and then we go one more seed so that these two are different. Otherwise they'd be doing the same thing. We'll do it one more time here. This one's 0.7, min darken. Now you can see what's happening here with our bricks. And then we'll do it one more time. Seed 5. Oops. Min darken, 0.8. Now this is cool node that I recently learned about called clamp grayscale, which is really cool. Basically what it does is it clamps your minimum or your maximum. So let me just pull from this guy as an example. Let me show you. Oops. Now there's 2 clamps and one's deprecated. Don't use that one. Use the clamp grayscale. So by default, this is, you know, your original input, and then we'll see what happens here. You can see that it's basically flattening. So if we actually move this over here, you can see over there on the left on the viewport that it's basically clamping that. And you can do it the other way around as well, which is like super useful in a lot of cases. Instead of having to play around with the levels node, which I sometimes don't like doing. So we clamp some of them, and it's going to start from the top to the bottom. So like the highest points are going to get clamped first. So like this is really bright, so it's going to clamp that first, and then it gives us kind of like another cut, except it's flat. And then here I do it again, but this one's a little bit more drastic. So this is just the same thing, except this one's at 0.575, this one's at 0.41. And then together here, I copy. And obviously they're both doing the same thing. So I want one to be more drastic than the other. That's why we have two, and one is flattening them more than the other. But obviously, if I don't have an opacity, then it's just going to take this one, because this will be the foreground. So we need an opacity. So I take here I spawn a portal, and then I change it to flood fill random grayscale D. So for the distance one. This is already distance, yeah. So it's for this guy. And then again, I do a histogram select. These are the settings for that. Plug that into the opacity. Now that means that these white ones are taken in this value. And then everything that's not in the white is taken in this values. Again, just to have more variety. And you can do this more, several times to get even more. And then after that, we have this levels here. I basically just raised the level out low to bring up the low points of our bricks, so you can see here. Now what do we do here? What is this? This is adding another cut. So the same thing we did here, except we're doing it a little differently. I'm taking a portal here with random gradient, flood fill random gradient, into a scan of 0.45, and then I'm using a levels here to bring up the darkness so that it doesn't cut all the way down. If we were to shift D to basically like cancel the effect, but it doesn't delete it, so you can shift D to get it back. So this is what it was originally, and then if we remove this levels and then we cut, you can see that our cut is going all the way to the bottom, but with this level we're basically raising the cut so that it doesn't go all the way to the bottom and it stops here. So we're using min darken, and then I think I already showed you guys this levels here. Once we have that, I do a blur just to kind of blur out the edges so that they're not so harsh or so steep. Just kind of soften that up. This is what it looked like originally, and then when I blurred it, it looks like this. But then here, I basically bring the edges back a little bit, and basically it's a multiply. And then I spawn in a portal, and I change this to mask brush shape, which if you remember, it's giving us that initial mask. So I want the blur to be applied, but blur is blurring in both directions. So if we look here, blur is going to blur towards the outside and the inside because it's blurring. Therefore, it blurs out and in. But now this is extending past the bounds of the original brick size. See, because like you can see here, the pixel stops here, but the blur is going past it. So I use this mask to multiply it to kind of cut it at the edge, and then just kind of smooth the edge from the mask inward, if that makes sense. See, so we're keeping this blur, but we're getting rid of the outside blur. And then I use an auto levels here to make sure that we're using our full range. So from this mask brick shape portal, we pull out into a bevels, and we're going to be beveling. Let me zoom out here. So we go from this to this, just to give it a more natural look. So we take that brick shape into a bevel here. You can see the settings here. And then this is a method that we've done before in previous tutorials, where we take the original mask and a bevel, and then we put the original mask through a levels, when we lower the level out high to 0.4. And basically, because this is the original bevel, where it bevels all the way to the ground, but with with a screen blend mode and a levels here, we are able to basically rise the bevel up. So if we look over, I'm just gonna undo that. So if I hide this, see the bevel is working here all the way to the bottom, but with this method, we're able to make it higher so it doesn't go all the way to the ground. Okay, so this would be what it would be normally, and then here we're increasing so it doesn't hit all the way to the ground. So I'm just gonna undo that, and that's at 0.4. So then I screen these two, and then I take the screened version and then min darken with our original outer levels here. All right, then we have some edgeware, pretty basic here. We start with the crystals 1. I make a portal for it. This should tell you what these settings are, but I'm going to click on it anyway. So it's seed 0, 32 scale. And then I blur my crystals a little bit because I don't want the cuts to be super harsh. So if we were to, disable this, it would look like that. So I blur it a little bit to make it a little softer. I do a slow blur grayscale here. So we take from the main path into the slow blur. And then it gives us this, which is okay because when we blend it back in here, we're going to lower the opacity so we don't get all of it. Otherwise, it will look like that. And then we can, blend in and out how much of it we want. Now, I have here an opacity because I want this edgeware to be on the edges only. And if you look here, this is going way past the edges because of the intensity. And we're using min. And the reason why, we need an opacity is because if we disable it, oops, let me undo that. Then it's going to give us this. And then this is a way to basically have it stop here, right? Because that's where this gradient is. So the way I did that is I took the brick shape mask into a blur, and then I inverted it. So it's saying, hey, I only want this effect to be in the white areas, and because this is blurred, it's going to blend smoothly into the brick rather than have it be a harsh line. Yeah, because if you just made this, like, let's say you had a scan here, and then you turned the contrast up, and then you did this, you would get like this harsh fall off where it would suddenly it would look like that, which you might want for something else, but not in our case here. So we want it to blend in smoothly. So then I do another blur grayscale. Just to kind of blend in our details. This could probably be 0.25, but yeah, let's go with 0.25. I think I like that better. Okay, now for the fun part. I'm going to do another tutorial on this part, but it'll be more in detail. We're just going to go a little bit faster for this part. But this is where a lot of our detail comes from. We're basically going to make a cliff side, like a cliff texture. And then we're going to use that texture, so you can see here. And then we basically use that to min darken, which is just another blend mode to remove or subtract from our bricks, which will give us a lot of the detail. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take the end result of the cliff. Actually, it already has one. So I'm going to take this portal, height cliff. Don't worry about this just yet. I'm just gonna plug that in here so that we can just worry about this basically secondary texture. So I'm gonna plug that in here, and what's it called? Height cliff. Like that. So it's not the best, but that's okay because I tweaked it so that it works with what we need. But This is a very basic, one of the very basic ways to make a cliff in Designer. Alright, so I went ahead and I disabled everything again. I should probably make this its own video, but it's okay. We're just gonna get it over with here. Alright, so we're gonna make our cliff texture now. So we're gonna start with a polygon 2. And we're just gonna make this star shape basically. And then we're gonna start with a cube 3D. And you can play around with these settings, but I don't want to take up. We're already at 45 minutes and we've barely gotten started. So you can see the settings here. Basically, it's a 3D cube that you can like spin around. Very cool. And then I'm going to take a min, darken, blend here to create basically like a pebble shape. And I'm going to auto level it to get again full range. And then I'm going to take a multi-directional warp grayscale here. Use a clouds 2, create a portal for it. And then using this warp grayscale, we're going to warp it on the edges based on that cloud with a max mode so that it only, cuts outward. We have a directional warp here. So we have a crystal 1. We're going to create a portal for it. Directional warp. Then that is going to feed into this guy. Min darken. We're going to create a gradient linear 1. And then we're going to use a levels here to kind of darken the bottom side there. We're going to min darken it. And it's going to give us this, which is kind of like a basic cliff shape that we're going to stack on top of itself several times. Then here we take that same gradient linear and we cut it in half basically. So we 0.5 the position and then we subtract to kind of give it that cut. Then we do another directional warp using this guy here. So we'll do this in just a second. Let me move that over there. So now let's go over here. We're going to take that multi-directional warp grayscale into a directional warp. We're going to use this crystal 1. Make a portal for it. That's going to go into the directional warp here. Same concept. We're going to take a min darken using the levels. And then that's going to go into a directional warp. And then we're going to put this same crystal once here into the intensity input. And then we're going to take this same guy here and do the same thing for this directional. And then we're going to get these two. Then we are going to plug the directional warp into a tile sampler grayscale. And this top one's going to go into pattern input 1. And then this guy's going to go into pattern input 2. And to get pattern input 2, because I think it only comes with 1, you got to change your pattern here to pattern input. And then change your input number to 2. I'm using random C10 because I thought it gave me the coolest result. 8x6. You can pretty much just pause the video here and kind of go over these. I don't want to have to take up more of your time. And then I'm going to take the tile sampler and plug that into the auto levels. I just kind of put this here because otherwise it wouldn't work. It would look like this. So I'm going to unhide that. And basically what we're doing is we're layering them and we're increasing the scale on them and the size random. We're stretching them on, one axis to kind of create like these flat ones. So it's kind of giving us like this very basic, like layered cliff. Auto levels to get the full range again. Then we use a directional warp with a purlin noise set to 3. Now this one doesn't have a portal because I only use this once and I use it here. So I don't have to worry about using it again. So therefore I don't need a portal for it. So then we go from, this to that. Then we do it one more time. Directional warp, except this one we're using our crystal, our portal from earlier. And then here I just, I doubled the tiling or increased the tiling. Now what we do here is basically we take this result into a transform 2D, and I rotated it, and I moved it. I think I rotated it by 180, but you can see the values here. And then I offset it. And basically what I did is I created this blend, set to max lighten, and then I came here and I moved it to where it gave me the most interesting kind of, you know, cliffside, which I thought was this one. And then once they're together, then we do another directional warp with our noise crystal, which is you know, this guy. And then here we do some more noise. We add some more noise. We use a slope blur grayscale, set to min. We take a Voronoi fractal. You can see the settings here, all the settings. We make a portal for it, even though I guess you don't have to because I don't use it ever again, so probably don't need it. Goes into an auto level, so I get the full range. And then this is a cool trick I learned from a tutorial, where if you take a gradient map, and then you go to the gradient editor, you click anywhere just to create you know, the markers. You can click and drag up to get rid of it, and then turn this turn the white one, and click the white one, the white marker, and then just leave green all the way up, and it'll do this, which is what I did here, just to show you how it's done. And then we use normal to high quality, which is just transforming, because I think this is a normal map, right? Because a normal map is made up of the same 3 channels that a color is, and every direction is a color. So you can see that everything pointing down is kind of this color, everything pointing to the right is like this red color, and then everything else pointing in the other direction is I forget what color it is, blue, I guess. Yeah, because it's RGB. It's red, blue, and green. So every axis, so if it's facing up, it's going to be green. If it's facing one way, it's going to be this color, and it's facing the other, it's going to be the other color, and then anything in between will be the other directions. So by isolating just the green direction, we're able to create basically new noises out of other noises. So if we take, for example, this clouds 2, and then we have this double clicked, and then we drag that in there. This is a new noise that we can now use that is now coming from the clouds, but it doesn't look like clouds. Well, I guess it kind of does, but it looks completely different. So that's a cool way to get more or different noises out of, you know, our normal noises. So we'll do 0.5 on the relief balance, 1 on that, and then we're using a normal quality. Sometimes I'll use high, so pay attention to that, which gives us more. But for this case, we don't need it. We can just go to normal. So we take this into that slope blur that we created to kind of give us that more of that rocky surface look. Then here we have, you can see here what it's changing. The way we did that was I took the slope blur here and I did a safe transform grayscale, and I just increased the tiling to 2. So we just increased the tiling on it. Then we did a directional warp using this new noise that we made. Plug that into the bottom. You can see the settings there. And then we do a vector warp grayscale to do some warping, and then we warp it by this slope blur. We do the same thing here, so you can just copy this gradient and then paste it over here and then just swap the input. That goes into the vector, and then you can see here what it's doing. Then we min darken that, and then it gives us, don't want to go too high or you'll start getting, actually that looks pretty cool. But once you have this entire like setup, because at the very end we basically min darken this texture over our bricks. So once you plug that in, you can come back here and start tweaking these things, and then decide what looks better on your bricks. But it's much easier to visualize once you have it set up. That way you can see the cuts being made into your bricks. Because if you're just trying to guess what this would look like on the bricks, it's much more difficult to tell if it would look good or not. Okay, so then we go from this directional warp into this transform 2D. And I think we just offset it a little bit. And then we do min darken. So we go from this to this. Again, just to create some more surface differences. And then I think I do it again. So I take this, I offset it. Yeah, no rotating, just offsetting. Min darken, and then I do it one more time. Except here I do a max lighten instead. Oops. So if we look here, if we turn that off, it looks like that. And like I said, I plugged this in and then I started tweaking it because I noticed I wanted more of that rocky surface on the bricks. I don't know if I showed this, but here you go. Then we have the auto levels to make sure we're using the full range. And then here we do another slope blur. Now this one you could probably... Actually, that's pretty good detail. So you can probably do without, but it's because it's so minimal. But all of these little details is the reason why we have such a, busy, surface here. So it's important. Don't get lazy, like I do sometimes. So we have we're using our noise crystal, 1/32 scale. So just a crystal 1, a basic crystal noise. Crystal noise 1, yeah. With a scale of 32. And it's a random seed of 0, 0. Or it's just 0. We blur that. And then here I just increase the tiling. And then here I multiply by our Perlin noise, set to scale of 8. Random seed 0. Just so that these guys aren't the same value everywhere. So we multiply to kind of make some be lower than others. Then I take this noise clouds 2 or clouds 2 with a default scale. So it's your default clouds 2. And I blur the clouds by 0.2 and then I slope blur. So we go from this to this. And then that's what feeds into this slope blur here. And then you can play around with these guys, see what this does. So you can see here, without it, and then with it. Now, one of my other new favorite nodes, are not new, but new to this graph, adding some surface detail. So we take a black and white spots 2 node here. We create a portal for it because we use this quite a lot. Default one, min darken 0.025. Min darken is also my new favorite blend mode. I thought I kind of understood it, but now I definitely understand it. So there you go, adding some surface detail. And then we auto levels again. And then we can create a portal called height cliff. And then from there, we have this max lighten blend mode here. And then we're going to take from the height cliff and we double or increase the tiling. And then let me zoom out here. Well, actually, let me just do this. Because the preview right now, it stops here. But we need it over here. So I'm going to just do a node. I'm going to call this just test. Let me just go all the way over here. Yeah, we have all this to cover, guys and girls. So if we go here, I'm just gonna go to test, plug that in. Oh god. Oh, it's because I should probably plug it in. Yeah, I should plug it. Yeah, I should plug it in here. Okay, so now let's go back. Here. So that's good. So it's not previewing this. So let me just turn some of these things off. Okay, so this is where we left off right here. So basically what I did, took a max lighten and I increased the tiling on this to give us this. And the reason why I did this is because the bricks are really small. So these details need to be smaller. Because if I didn't do this, then the details would be too large and it wouldn't be very noticeable. So I needed some micro details, so I just kind of duplicated it, moved it, and then blended it. And again, same thing, I just increased it. And if you want, you can like move it around to find a better spot that you might like, but we're just using this to subtract, so it's not that big of a deal. So then here, I take a flat fill random color D, so this is like the distanced one. And then as you can see here, it breaks it up into our brick sizes. And then I use a levels here because I know I'll need it for my blend mode. So then let's just round this up to 0.33. Okay, so now let me go back over to the front. And I'm gonna bring the main connection back. And then I'm going to plug this back in here. So this is where we left off a while ago before we started the cliff sequence. I don't need this anymore, so we can delete that. And then, so now this is our rocky surface, because now that we did basically this rocky cliffside, now we can edit on top. So all that work just to get this, which is, can probably seem a little bit annoying, but you know, it's what you gotta do. So we used overlay here, and we changed it to 0.75. Another new blend mode I've started using a lot. And then we auto levels. And then I have a levels here. Not sure why it's not doing anything. Why isn't it changing? Oh, maybe because of something else down the line. Okay, we'll just ignore that for now. We'll just keep going. So this level is just increasing the level out low to 0.2. Okay, this one's doing something. Okay, so same thing we did earlier. Now we're going to trim our bricks because right now we're because we've raised the darkness here. You can see that we created another row. So we want to use this mask again, or this mask to cut it. But we don't want to cut it again completely cleanly, or we get something ridiculous like this, which would look really silly in your render. So I blurred it a little bit, 0.25, the mask, so that it gets a little bit of an edge there. Then we do some surface damage. Like that. And we take a noise crystal, or crystal 1, and then we change the scale to 32, and we're using a seed of 0. Then here we increase the tiling again. We do a histogram scan. And then we blur it a little bit. And then here we slope blur it using a basic clouds 2. We blur the clouds. Then we slope blur it. And then we take that same clouds noise into another blur here. Then we slope blur the sloped blur noise crystal again. Then we blur a lot of blurring here. Then we blur that result. And then we take that result and this result. And we do a copy and we get basically half of it. So we get half of this and half of that to get this. Which, not looking back, I don't know if it's really not necessary, but we'll stick to the script here. And then we do our levels. Now this level is just here because I thought I might need to tweak it later, but I ended up not. So you probably don't even need it because it's at the default. And then it's set to subtract. Again, just adding some more basic surface damage. And here it's going to look a little stylized because it's just like this blurry, you know, damage. but as we start layering more detail, it starts to kind of all come together. So another cool node here, dirt 1, it's a noise. We're going to create a portal for it. Histogram scan. We're going to take our flood fill random color D for, distance again. Took this guy, plug it in here, intensity to 10. It's hardly noticeable because these are really tiny, but it's bringing it up based on the brick. Now here I invert it because of the way, actually, no, I thought I was using min darken, but I guess not. But yeah, just invert it. And obviously with multiply, it's going to lower wherever it's darker, so that's why I had to invert it. Otherwise it would give us this, which is lowering the black around the white. So these are actually popping out. I wanted the opposite of that, so that's why I inverted it. And it's like cutting in. Okay, so then we multiply that by 0.025. Very subtle, again, subtle details. Boom, very cool. And now here, I want what I didn't want here, which is like having some parts kind of actually pop out. Whoops. So you can see that these are actually coming outward. So we take a dirt 3 just to change it up. Histogram scan. We take our basic clouds here. This is what it looks like. So into a slope blur. So we blur them a little bit. Probably don't even need it. It's not that noticeable, but it all comes together. Okay, sorry. Sharpen here. And again, just very, very subtle details. This noise, you don't have to warp it like we did here because it's so tiny that you're not going to have one of these guys. Where are they? Yeah, like this guy here isn't big enough to run from one brick to the other. So no one would ever know. Now, if you wanted to be like really cool and super like detailed, you could break it up, but it's not really needed because it's so tiny. No one's going to ever know that it's continuous. But anyways, so because we want to have these extrusions, we wanted to have it pop out, we're doing an add. Okay. Now here is our first boolean of the graph. I need to stretch. We use this clamp here. Now this is probably like the least worked out boolean that I have here. I just kind of added it for fun, but basically we have a boolean here where we can make our bricks flat. So let's turn this on, and basically from the result here into a clamp grayscale, and I made it into a a parameter. So if we double click outside here, all our parameters come up. We'll give you a quick rundown on how to do this real quick. So if you have a clamp here, grayscale, boom, bam, bing, and then you go here, click on this little drop down, and then expose this new graph. We called this one, what do we call it? Flat. I'm gonna call it flat bricks 2 because we already have one over here, and then the label will be flat bricks 2 question mark. And then here you can change like your default. So every time you use this, it's going to be this value. You can clamp it so you have a minimum and a maximum, and then you have to have this on, and then hit OK. So now when it turns blue when it's a parameter. So now when we double click outside, we'll see here. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. Flags bricks 2. So now that we have this, when we go to our switch grayscale, so it has 2 inputs, a true and a false. So if it's false, to this. If it's true, to this. So if we go back over here, I didn't group this, but you are able to group your parameters. So if we go back over here and we open this back up, you can give it a group. That way, if you want some parameters, if there's brick related parameters, you can make a group called brick, and then all of these things will be together. And then, oh no, this is not a boolean. This is a float. Sorry about that. So I should go back. I'm getting my stuff mixed. I'm trying to go fast and I'm messing up. We're actually taking longer. So this would be like brick flatness. Let's go with that. And then we'll make the default 0.7. So now when we go back over to preview, let's say that, okay, so that's how you set this up. Now I already have this set up, so I'm just going to delete this. Go over here, and it should be gone because I deleted it. So yeah, so I see I already have a brickness or brick flatness. So then if I go here and I turn on my, just turn off snow. If I turn on my missing bricks, sorry, not missing bricks. What am I doing? Flat bricks. You can see that it's making them all flat. Now we could do like a blend mode and then make it so that only some of them are flat and not all of them. But ain't nobody got time for that. We're already at an hour and 10 minutes. Holy. Okay, so then here's our slider that we created here. So then we can. You gonna do something? You gonna make me look like a fool here? Why isn't it working? Why aren't you working? Alright, hold on. Technical difficulties. Be right back. Oh my god. I'm so dumb. Okay. So this one that wasn't working was the one we deleted. And I have two groups, one for sliders and one for Boolean. So the correct one is in here. And then this one that I forgot that I deleted it here, but I didn't delete from here, was the bad actor. So let me delete this guy. Make sure it's the right one. Yeah, brick flats, the one we temporarily made. Okay, so delete that. Okay, sorry about that. I was like restarting and doing all these things. Okay, so sliders. This is the brick flatness we need. So maybe you want something like that. That could be something cool. But anyways, yeah, we're not actually. Let's leave it at. Yeah, let's leave it at 8.6. But we're gonna actually disable that Boolean right now. We're not gonna be worrying about flat bricks, but just something there if you wanted. You know, you could do that. Just a cool effect. Because then what you could do is you could have like this like cutting effect that you see on stones that are cut, like this wavy stuff, which would only apply to the flat, which would be really cool, but not for this one. Maybe in a future one. So we're gonna disable that. Okay, great. So now we're back to normal. So this is the false path here. So it's what you're seeing here is this guy. So if you're not doing any of this, then just do this. Just have this go straight to angled sloping here. Okay. I know I can get a little messy with all these things here. Okay. So now here, if we look here, basically just doing some simple sloping, angled sloping on our bricks. So we took our flood fill main into a angled variation to the 1, and then we do a seed of 6 because I think is the last one we used was at 5, so this one is 6. We take our, this should be over here, so it's easier to read. Okay, so we took our brick shape, it goes into our distance. It will. No, here we distance it. Then we actually we don't even need this. Yeah, we don't need this, but whatever. I'm just gonna leave it. Then that goes into this level, and I don't know. This should be in auto levels. The reason why this should be in auto levels, even though this levels here has an auto levels button, is that if this gradient would change, then this auto level would not readjust because you have to manually do it. But with this, it would always automatically do it. So you want to use this in a case like this, because that way it's always getting the auto levels. That way you don't have to like manually hit apply auto levels. Okay, so then we have sloping, but we have we have an opacity input because we don't want all our bricks to slope the same amount. So we just take this the flood fill random grayscale distance, and obviously the sloping is going to be stronger on these white ones, and then these black ones are going to be less strong. So if we were to turn this off, this is what it looked like. Again, just subtle details. You don't want everything to be sloping. You know, some are more sloped than others, etc. So now here, same thing, except we're doing height. So I'm just going to turn this on. So you can see here, subtle. And I just moved it in closer so it's easier to see. But basically, we're using the flood fill random grayscale distance version. We clamp it a little bit. And then we subtract by 0.075 to lower some of them. Then we're taking from the portal here into a histogram select, 2 histogram selects. Now they're basically the same one. I guess what I could have done is I could have just taken this and did a scan and then just did this and this, and that would give me this without having to, but it's okay. So we have 2 selects here. You can see the settings there. And again, this is doing more targeted, is what I called it, because it's only moving these. So we have 2 of them. So this one kind of brings all of them down a little bit. And then this one brings these guys only down a little bit, just to get like more heavy, more dramatically lower than others. All right. So now we have our slope damage. So let's go top down and get closer so we can see what it's doing. So you can see it there. We just take a small Perlin noise here, set to 64. I should have just used the Perlin 32 and then multiplied it, but it's okay. We have a 64 Perlin. These are pretty cheap. And then we blur that. Then again, we do the vector warping thingy with the color distance to flood fill. Set to 10. Then we slow blur our main path here. Set to min, 0.1. And then from this guy, we also do an invert. And then we use the levels. Because now we're targeting these areas. And I probably should have just done an auto levels maybe. No, because then that means it goes all the way down to the ground. Yeah, we don't want that. I think that's why I'm using those levels. Because otherwise it would look like this. But I wanted to be more subtle. So we played around with some of the settings here. Oh, look at me. I made them nice for you guys ahead of time. And then min darken to lower. Okay. Then we have surface detail here. Very subtle. You can barely tell. Might as well not even be there. But it's there. And this is pretty simple. Just take a clouds 1. We create a portal for it. We blur it a little bit. And then we warp it using our usual guy here. And then we use overlay. Let's see what happens if we turn it up. It does that. So obviously we don't want that much. We just want a little bit of it. And there it is. All right, how we looking? How we looking? How we looking? All right, we're about halfway there, guys. Not bad, not bad. Oh, God. Okay, so what's this? This is adding like bigger pocket holes or crevices. Pick up the pace here. I keep saying that, but it is what it is. The way she goes. We take a grunge spots here. And then I bevel the holes outward, so it's a positive value. You can see the settings there. Then we slow blur it to kind of do some deforming on them. So we go from this to this. We take a Gaussian noise, create a portal for it, even though we never use it again, but that's okay. You probably don't need it then. We do an auto level just to make sure we're getting the full range. Then that's how we do the deforming based on this. Then we slow blur again. We use the noise clouds 2. This is the default one. We blur it a little bit. Auto levels it again, getting the full range back. Do it after the blur. Slow blur, pretty basic here. And then here we multiply, I think, yeah, multiply by 0.75 with this auto levels, just to kind of, because I don't want all my holes to be the same depth. So I use a multiply to sync some more than others. So you can see the difference there. Again, it's all about variety and detail. We use our color here again to warp it. Yeah, you want to warp it at the end. And then we auto levels it. And then we subtract to get these. Boom, next. What's this? Cracks. Okay, so this is pretty... I'm going to go faster on this because we always... Cracks are pretty... we cover cracks a lot. Probably a bit more dramatic, but... it's more dramatic on some bricks than others, so... Anyways, okay. Yeah, so this is just like a very cheap crack. Nothing too crazy here. Sells too. And a Perlin noise set to 32. This one we do create a portal for because we do use this several times, and it's using 32 scale and it's set to random seed 1. Multi-directional warp grayscale just to warp our cracks so that they're not perfectly straight, which is lame and unrealistic. Then we bevel those wavy cracks inward, so negative. Then we slope blur to create this gradient heading outward with a noise Perlin scale of 8. Then we auto level it to make sure we're getting the full range. I need to stop saying that. We take this noise Perlin 8 here into a transform 2D and we increase the tiling. Plug that into the slope for the slope blur. Again, just to make some more variety. And then we take the our crystal noise from earlier, set to 32 scale. We blur it a little bit, and then we slow blur it to get this effect. Then we do one more slope blur grayscale, but this one's way more grainier and way more detailed. We take our clouds 2 noise, our basic one, our default one. Oops. Okay, and it gives us this detail here. And then again, same thing that we did here, where I don't want all my cracks to be at the same depth. I take this Perlin noise here. We follow it down this way, down here, up here, boom, 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 into a multiply. So then we go from this to that. So, you know, some are going to be kind of like blending out. So it's kind of like they're going down and they're going back up, and we're having that smooth transition by having this Perlin noise here multiplying. And then again, we do our warp because obviously we don't want cracks to run from one brick to the other. That's not cool. And then here we take our flood fill random grayscale distance into a levels, and then we have our histogram select. And then we get this. So we squish, because the range here between black and white is all the way, right? So we have 0 and we have 1. I want to lower that gap, so I use a levels node. You can use a histogram range as well. And then I use this select to get a random version of this, and I contrast it all the way up, and then I multiply it to get rid of it. So this stuff is black, so it's only going to take effect on anything that's above 0. And it's going to be at the intensity of the grayscale. So then that goes into the opacity, so that we don't have cracks on all the bricks. And then the cracks that are on the bricks are of varying depths or subtraction depths. So if I turn this off, you can see that all the bricks have cracks, but they're still at varying depths because of this. So we're just going to reconnect that again. Okay, so then here we do this is our scratch factory. These are kind of hard to see, so let me actually find one. Okay, so like up here, which translates to these guys right here. Boom, boom. So it's kind of like a sword ran by, or someone missed their swing and hit the brick. Probably a bad swordsman. Wouldn't be me. Okay, so yeah, so we have large and small. So let's start with the large. We will start with doing an ambient occlusion HBAO. I'm using HB and not RT because it would be. I really only use the ray trace version for the end, but for these details you don't really need that. So I'm going to use an HBAO. You can probably even turn down this quality sample to be a little cheaper if you need it. So we took the HBAO of our current result after the cracks, and we histogram scan it. And then we take that same result from our cracks brick into a histogram scan. All right. I had to run away for a second and burn my potatoes, but it's okay. Okay, where did we get off? I think we covered this. Then we have our scan coming from this guy. Then here we use a non-uniform blur. Okay, back again. Sorry, I had a call from my dentist. Jeez. Everything just coming up at once. Okay. So this non-uniform blur grayscale, intensity of 5, samples at 9. Some of these non-uniforms that I use, I don't go all the way up because I don't really need it. Some of them are just overkill. So this is one of them. So that goes into a histogram scan. You can see what's happening here. And then we have this ambient occlusion going into a scan. And then we take both of these and we multiply them to create this. Now this gets multiplied with our scratches here. Let's just do this so it's easier to read. Okay, so this is going to be the foreground that we're going to be multiplying with our scratches. So these are the scratch settings. Yeah, nothing too fancy. You can just pause here and go copy these. So then we multiply that, and basically this is, I'm using this mask here to tell my scratches where they belong. So you can see here that I don't want them to cut all the way down the brick because obviously a scratch wouldn't go down and run down and go all the way down here. I want it to kind of blend out towards the edge. So that's what this mask is doing. It's making sure that the scratches are only on the white, which they start to fade out. So the sword scratch or whatever type of scratch is starting to fade out as it gets to the edge. And we did that using this non-uniform blur. Okay, so then we multiply that, and then you can see that the scratches change. Because we don't want to scratch here. So then we take that, and we subtract from our main cracks brick here. Now we create a portal after this guy, because we're going to use it for color later. And then we take the continuation, or we continue with this before this blend here into a transform 2D, and I basically just double the amount of scratches, and then I do the same thing I did here. So I multiply, because again, but these are the same scratches but just smaller, and I think I also rotate them. Yeah, I rotate them and I increase the tiling, and then that gives me my mask for my small scratches, and then that goes on here as well, and you can see that they're smaller. So that's how we make our large and our smaller ones. And then last thing, I think this is the end of just the bricks. So then here we sharpen. Everything. Just to kind of make that detail pop. We're an hour and a half, so I think I'm going to call it here for bricks. Or should we keep going? How much is left? The decent amount. Yeah, I think I'm gonna call it here for height. I'm gonna have to split into 2 parts. So this will be up to the bricks, and then in the next part, in part 1B, we'll be covering the mortar between the bricks. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. All right. Hope you guys learned something, and I'll catch you guys on the next part.